Welcome everyone who's just joined. My name is Jake Monroe. I'm a soil management specialist for field crops with OMAFRA. And on behalf of the OMAFRA soil team, welcome to our second event out of 3. And thanks, Ben. Ben's just pulled up our slide set for this evening. So tonight we're going to be talking about strip till and cover crops. How do they work together? For those who participated on Tuesday night, we were talking about timing and tools and had a great event and lots of great questions that came forward for our farmer speakers. So, just the purpose of tonight is, again, to build on the event that already took place a couple nights ago and kind of drill down into another topic that's of great interest out there, which is, cover crops. How do they work within a strip till system? And you've got 4 farmers you're going to hear from tonight who've got a ton of experience combined in this topic area. So just a little bit of housekeeping, like I mentioned, and for those who've just joined, the settings as a general participant, you're not going to be able to unmute yourself. I'd also ask that you keep your video off just because of the numbers that we have. The presenters are going to have their videos on throughout the evening. You're going to be hearing from 4 speakers, as I mentioned, 4 growers who are doing strip till in different parts of the province: Woody Van Arkel, Matt Beischlag, Martin and Warren Schneckenburger. We're going to hear short presentations from each of them. So they're going to give kind of 5 to 7 minute talks each, give you an overview of their operations, what they're doing with strip till and cover crops in combination. And then we're going to have an opportunity from about probably 7:30, 7:35 for about 20 minutes to have a moderated panel. My colleague Anne Verhollen, our soil management specialist for horticulture and cover crop expert at OMAFRA, she's going to lead that discussion with Woody, Matt, Brad, and Warren. The last couple of minutes, I'm going to just introduce to all of you the Farm and Food Care Strip Till video series, which is coming out. I recognize we've got probably a lot of participants who already saw and heard about this a couple nights ago. I'm going to skip the video, but I will make you aware of a video series that's going to be coming out shortly. And we'll end off the evening there's going to be just an optional question and answer period where I hope you can, if you're interested, stay on, and we'll have a hard stop at about 8:30 after an optional Q&A. So without further ado, I think we're ready to start with our first presenter. So Ben, you can move to the next slide, and Woody, if you can unmute, I'll hand it over to you. Thanks.
So, good evening. I'm Martin Van Arkel, or Woody, as a lot of you may know. And if you want to start with the first slide, I always like to start with my location so everybody knows where I'm farming, my climate, my environment. I farm variable soil, anything from a sand loam to a clay loam, sometimes within 100 feet of each other. I've been strip tilling now for 12 years, no-tilled soybeans and wheat for almost 25 years. And cover crops have been a part of the strip till system almost from the beginning. The reason I started using strip till was I'm a sugar beet grower, and standard practice for me at the time was to fall till it flat, go with a stale seed bed to plant into in the spring, which left no cover, no residue. Things were blowing off my sandy loam. So I wasn't happy with it, so I started to investigate strip till actually for the sugar beet system. And the first year was a 10-acre piece of sugar beets. The following year, I did all my sugar beets and started to do my corn. Next slide. So I spent probably 2 years before I started strip tilling, investigating different options. At the time, the Gladiator wasn't there yet. The Soil Warrior was still promoted as a 2-pass system. So I kind of settled on the Orthman, with the second choice being the Dawn. but I settled on a Northman for a number of reasons. It had a shank. I liked the fixed wavy coulters to build the berm, things like that. I ran that for 10 years, and due to some different circumstances, that strip till machine and myself parted ways, and I went to plan B, which was always in the back of my head, was the Dawn units. One thing I really like about the Dawn unit is it requires about half or less horsepower to pull than the Horseman. You can pull it faster. It's not set up for fertilizer yet, but I'm going, that's the plan down the road to set it up for fertilizer. Next slide. So here I've got a series of examples of how I've been incorporating cover crops into the strip till system. So number one is a wheat field, or was a wheat field, had an application of manure, multi-species cover crop planted, and then with cereal rye, with the cereal rye surviving the winter, and that's the spring shot. Knowing what I know now, I'm not sure I would continue using cereal rye in that application going into corn, but that particular field went into soybeans and, sugar beets, and that worked really well. I was very happy with that. The second slide is actually a neighbor's field, and they wanted to do something, so I went in and blocked off. Actually, I used my interseeding drill, so it was set up for 3 runs on 30 inches. Again, cereal rye. Looking back, you could probably do this with oats and let it winter kill. This is a very sandy farm, actually. So I just drilled in the cereal rye behind the edible beans, and then in the spring, those strips were easy to strip till through, and we planted corn without any issues. 3 and 4, I really like to do, and it's instead of a multi-species, it's frost-seeded red clover. I'll get into how I deal with it in a bit, but it's strip tilled about late August, early September, and then I leave it grow at number 4 is actually a picture I took the other day, and the clover is grown back, almost covering the strips, protecting it from the weather. The roots have grown back in a bit, hold it together, so it's a little more protection from washout and concerns like that. Next slide. So the next slide, when it pops up, will be a picture of my a band sprayer. It's an old sugar beet band sprayer. It's kind of junkyard engineering by inventory. And this is in that clover field, actually, that I had a picture of there in the first slide, or the previous slides. And the reason I band spray is I find it makes a cleaner, nicer strip. Especially with the shank machine. The shank, you could almost not tell within a week that I'd gone through red clover. It didn't kill it. And my goal is to keep it the strip in between there till spring. So I want to have a little bit of a cleaner strip. So I go in, band spray it. I do the same on the multi-species. It gives me a clean strip, or a dead zone that the strip till works much better through. I find it just does a nicer, neater job. So next strip, or slide, sorry. And these will be examples of what I talked about earlier the following spring. And I should have put them in a different order, but number 4 was that cereal rye I did with my interseeding drill on that sandy ground. That's that side dressing time. The rye's laying down flat. We pulled spring strips through that and planted. Worked really well. Lots of ground cover. Didn't have any issues at all. I'm still not sure that rye is something we should be using after some of the research that's been showing up lately, but it was an option that worked. The other three pictures are just the different scenarios. Terminated way ahead of planting, terminated at planting, terminated after planting, actually. And that's the beauty of this strip till cover crop system. It gives you a lot of options with dealing with the cover crop in the spring, weather dependent. And with that, I'll let the next guy talk.
Thanks very much, Woody, and apologies to everyone just before we move to Matt. I realized that we had a lot of noise, and Woody, I'm sure that was a little challenging for you to think straight while all the noise is coming through. That's an opportunity for me to mention our tech support is Sebastian Belliard, and he's changed his name. So if you're having any technical issues, just reach out to Sebastian in the chat. And as you hear Matt's talk here, also, if you have questions that come up, please direct message Ann Verhollen or add to the general chat. And Matt, I'll hand it over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Jake. Yeah, so I'm Matt Beischlag from Beischlag Farms, Inc. We've been farming, I guess, in our area since the early 50s. Next slide there. So this is a picture still of our grain site in our shop here. So we've been growing broiler chickens in 3 barns, and crops include corn, wheat, soybeans, and white beans. Next slide there, Ben. So the beginning, 19 from when we started farming in the area to 97, we're full width tillage. We pulled, you name it, we pulled it across there. Plow, chisel plow, disc ripper, cultivator, packer, etc. 2016, we bought a strip till unit. We bought 8 units. We had an opportunity to buy 8 units, so we did, and we went with RTK and tried to match it up with a 12-row planter, but it just wasn't there. It was on, but not on enough. So next slide. So today, this is what we got. Up front, we have a Case IH Magnum, a 340 horse tractor. Putting fertilizer down is our Salford ST8. It's a twin bin, variable rate capable. And we got our 12-row strip till unit, all done, pluribus units on it. Next slide, Ben. So what got us into strip till and cover crops? In the spring, we'd cultivate ground, plow ground, disc rip ground, and we get it just perfect. And you go to bed at night and you think you're going to plant in the morning, and you get that pounding rain, you hear it hitting the tin roof, and it just turned that clay into concrete. Next slide. So a pretty good, interesting study out of Iowa State University. They did just a study on raindrops impacting bare soil. And just to kind of put it in perspective, like 1 inch of rain on 1 square foot of ground is 6 pounds per square foot. And each one of those raindrops is falling at 20 miles an hour average speed. So if you think about that, it's just like a pile of little jackhammers hitting your ground all at once. Next slide, Ben. So this is kind of where we found the compromise. So with strip till, you're kind of getting the best of both worlds, the no-till and that bare strip to plant into. Next slide, Ben. Soil improvements we've seen over the years. This is this year here, and we're getting better aggregation of our soil. It's staying looser. You can feel it when you walk across the field. Doesn't feel like you're walking on real hard ground. It's nice, and feels like you're walking across on a sponge. Next slide, Ben. So a couple, just a little bit of a cost comparison of some of the cover crops we used. The Works, this is a all out we went and tried this year. A little overkill in my opinion, and it's kind of costly, but it looks beautiful out there, and we're going to see what it does and maybe start trimming it back from there. For the most part, we've been using red clover on behind wheat since as long as I can remember. So it's pretty reasonable. Bin run oat cover crop is 28 cents a pound. You're looking at $25 an acre for that. Next slide, Ben. So this is what we got. I took these pictures a week ago. Turnips and that daikon radish absolutely love chicken manure. They're just massive out there. good ground cover, good foliage. I don't know if it's going to be a problem in the spring with all that foliage is going to inhibit the drying of the soil. I don't know. We're going to find out. Next slide. So here's a shot of what we strip tilled into. This is red clover after wheat this year. This is picture was taken right after I strip tilled in late August. So we're getting about an 8-inch wide strip with our Dawn system, and we're going about 4 inches to 5 inches deep. In red clover with our Dawn, I'm not really overly happy with it. We're having some trouble getting in the ground. It can do a better job. It's just our hard clay. The Dawn system likes the real loose ground, like sandier ground. The picture on the right there is the farm after we've strip tilled it. That's from the drone shot there. You really can't really tell we've even been in there after 3 or 4 weeks. Next slide, Ben. So here's strip till conditions that we're kind of working with. The works mix that we did this fall, it's a real nice strip it's making, but it's got a lot of aggregation of that soil in it, and I'm finding I'm not getting the height out of the berm I'd like to overwinter. The middle picture, harvest, that's red clover ground after we've harvested it for seed. That really probably worked the best. It came up just absolutely beautiful. And then, like I say, that's the same picture there from the last slide there, but the red clover after wheat. Next slide, Ben. This is another one we're working on here right now on our farm. We've been terminating cover crops like with oats and the red clover in the fall. We've had some success and some failure with that. So this piece here, what I've done is I've stripped every other pass with the sprayer and killed that cover crop off. So we're going to see what kind of comes of that and where it's going to benefit us if with drying or maybe not drying up. We don't know. Next slide, Ben. And with that, I'll pass it back to Jake. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you, Matt. So next up, we've got Brad Martin. Can you test the audio?
Can you hear me?
Yep, I hear you loud and clear.
Okay, good. Good evening, everyone. So Brad Martin here. We are farming in Wellington County, Harrison clay loam soil. First time bringing presentation, so please bear with me. So I found choosing that interesting. Thanks to those speakers. Thankful to have the opportunity to farm. It's my dad and myself. We're farming corn, soy, wheat rotation, 400 acres ourselves and 250 custom. So dad was full tillage and he was sick of the dead furrows, so he got a rollover plow. And then in 2017, I came home from my job, and then in 2013, we had some heavy rains and the corn was 3-leaf. We had some washouts, weren't happy with that. So we were looking for less tillage. Vertical tillage was maybe what we were thinking. We wanted to do strip till, but it just felt like too big a jump for us. We weren't comfortable with that. We were scared we're not going to get a corn crop. So we ended up getting a vertical till, Lemkin, I guess. And that's what we did for 1 year. And then our local coon dealer, he brought a Gladiator out and we demoed that. And then I guess we were happy with that, so we ended up buying it. Ben, are the pictures, do you mind moving ahead? Okay, so I maybe got ahead of myself here. This was our old planter. We bought a 6-row Kinsey. It was only a corn planter when we bought it. We took it down to Kearney Planters and they put on those pusher units for us for the soybeans then. And there you can see that I'm planting in cereal rye in the spring. I think that was planted maybe 50 pounds, maybe 40, not sure. And for soybeans, we had great success. It worked well. It just takes a little bit of time to get your planter set up well. Next slide, please. Just another shot driving ahead. I guess the next slide. And then in 2018, 18, we were looking for a little more capacity. So we got an 8-row. And here you can see that we plant the soybeans no-till in between the corn rows, try to drive in either side of the old corn row. And it seems to be working well for us. Next slide, please. And then here you can see us on the home farm. That was planting. I felt we can plant a little bit earlier. Just this year, the year this picture was taken, the cereal rye didn't grow that much over winter. That had been a silage field, and then we planted rye after the silage, which is what we're doing every year now. And I really like that. I just feel it dries out the soil a little bit earlier. We get out in the field and get started a little bit sooner. So yeah, we're planting green here, although it looks like there's not too much rye there this year. Next slide. So this is then when we're strip tilling, just a shot in the tractor out in the field. Next slide, please. And then, so when we bought the 8-row, that planter only had liquid fertilizer on it. Our old one had the dry. So then what we were doing is we'd strip till, and then we'd put our starter fertilizer down as we were planting. However, the new planter just had liquid. So we ended up, we had to figure something out how to get our starter fertilizer down there. And so we priced them on tag air card, but we just felt for our small acreage, it was too much money to buy an expensive air card like that. So we looked around a bit. We found a FlexiCoil, a used air card down in Nebraska. We got it shipped up here, and then we had to do some modifications on it just to get it set up. The next slide, please. And then here you can see on, I guess it's the home farm, the backfield. We're planting on the strips then, and I know on Tuesday night some guys were saying they had a little bit of issues with the planter staying on top of the berms. Our Gladiator is a shank unit. For myself, I'm happy with that, and we personally don't have any issues with the planter staying on top of the berm. I think it's important to not make the berm too high in the spring, otherwise you maybe have more of a hill to try to balance your planter on top. And I guess for us, we started with fall strip tilling, and then one year we didn't have time, we didn't get around to it, and then we just left, or we didn't do it. And then in the spring we did it, and I guess ever since we felt it's a waste of time to go in the fall. So we actually are only doing spring strip tilling now, and then planting into it shortly after. Next slide. Here's a picture just out doing a custom job. It was a hay field. I burned it off the previous fall, and we're no-tilling corn into it. And it's been working well for the guy. We've been doing it a number of years now, and he likes it. It's less cost. He doesn't have to work it in the fall and again in the spring. So I guess I just thought I'd show that. Next slide, please. So here's a picture of in the shop. I enjoy this in the winter. We had to build a hedge for it, and the air lines were all cracked and shot, so we had to get new ones, string that all up. And then, yeah, just doing the modifications, I guess, getting it all set up. Next slide. Just another picture of my boys there in the shop with me, and then you can see the piping coming up there, just slowly working away at it. And then for us, we had checked in with the dealer. They were sure we have to put air diffusers on, and we had talked with another fellow that had a Gladiator like this, and he said he didn't put any on, and I decided I'm just going to save the money, not put the air diffusers on. And my thought was, if we have the full airflow going down into the berm, it kind of blows it apart down in the berm and does more of a tumble mix rather than just pumping it in there in one row, and obviously trying to mitigate seed burn. And we have never had any seed burn. We're putting on close to 300 pounds an acre. The starter fertilizer, and it's worked well for us. Next slide. just another shot of I had totally rebuilt the metering gearboxes here. Just had it all torn apart, put new bearings in it and stuff like that. Next slide. Okay, so now going to cover crops. As long as I can remember, my dad, he was broadcasting clover into the wheat in the spring, and it worked well. However, after, I don't know if the wheat crops are getting thicker, and then I think we're finding we're having poorer stands. So we, of the clover, so we started doing oats afterward, after the wheat came off, and then we moved to multi-species. And this is a sorghum that you see here, sorghum Sudan grass, and then there's also a few others in there in the mix as well. Next slide, please. Just a shot out the back. This was before we had the air cart, so then we fall strip tilled that, and then also again in the spring. And I was amazed how that cover crop went through the Gladiator, no trouble, no plugging. It just went through. The berm maybe wasn't quite as wide as it would be with no residue, but it still made a beautiful berm. Very mellow soil. Next slide, please. Not seeing the next slide yet. Maybe you're having trouble there, Ben.
You got the radish photo is up there, Brad. It might not be shown on your screen, but you could speak to that. That's what I'm seeing on my end.
Okay, Okay, yeah. So that'll be the picture of the bio strips. So we've now since 2019, I guess, yeah, 19 and 20, I guess, we are planting bio strips, and we with the seed drill, we're doing 2 runs of cereal rye and 2 runs of radish. And then the radish, and I guess there's crimson clover mixed in there as well. The radish will die over winter, and then we can have a nice clean berm, as Woody was speaking as well, for the spring. And then we have no residue there we see it now. We don't have to deal with the residue in the spring there, the cover crop. And we still have the living roots in between there to hold the nutrients over winter. For ourselves, we also have beef manure and chicken manure, and we like spreading that in October, maybe a knee-high cover crop, and then we feel we don't lose any nitrogen because it kind of just floats in between the cover crop. Next slide, please. And there's the picture. We're just out there stripping in between the bio strips there. Too bad it's not in line with the rows there. You can't see it as good, but that's what we're doing there. Next slide, please. Then here's the picture of our 750 Deere drill. The APV seeder in the front is what we blow the radish and the crimson clover in between rows, and then I blocked off those 2 runs out of the box drill, and then the cereal rye gets planted through the box metering drill. So the reason we couldn't do the radish out of the box drill is because it would meter out way too fast, according to how the seed size is so much smaller than the cereal rye. So I think I should be shutting down here. I think the time's up. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Brad. That was really interesting. I enjoyed that photo you had there, the sorghum Sudan grass, and the job that your strip till unit did on that. So last but not least, Warren, I'll hand it over to you.
All right, you can hear me?
You're good.
Good, perfect. All right, so Warren Schneckenburger, farm just outside of Morrisburg, Ontario, in Eastern Ontario. Corn, beans, wheat, cash crop farm. We've been strip tilling since 2016, no tilling since the mid 80s. Conventional tillage primarily on corn up until 2016. Yeah, next slide, please. So I was asked to talk about strip till and cover crops. So the others gave kind of what they're doing. Now I'm going to talk about some of the struggles we've had, because we've had a lot of struggles with trying to get a covered crop in front of corn and not lose a lot of money which is sort of the goal we're trying to achieve, is not losing the money. This is one of the ways I tried. I think this would have been successful if it wouldn't have been the fall of 2016, which led into the spring of 2017, where it was really warm and it just rained and rained and rained and rained and rained. And by the time June 10th or so got around that we could finally get planting some corn, this rye was 7 feet tall, headed out. And yep, I wouldn't recommend planting corn in those conditions. Next slide. But it is a pretty slide. Yeah, so the arrow's not in the right spot. It must have, when I sent these to Jake, it must have got moved a little bit. It's more over south of Ottawa there. Getting ahead of yourself. So next slide, please. So like I said, we have a Soil Warrior homemade unit, 16 row with a Montag behind. Yeah, it can be a challenge some falls to get all the strips made. This is from last year. This photo actually spurred quite a debate on Twitter as to whether this was the right move or not. It was. It ended up being our highest yielding cornfield. So haters gonna hate, right? But anyway, so we have a lot of experience strip tilling corn. It's my vastly preferred method for growing corn. But like I said, we have had some setbacks with covers. Next slide. That being said, we do interseed close to 1,500 acres of cereal rye into standing corn. We use our high boy sprayer with we take the boom off, add a spreader, and are interseeding pretty well every acre going to soybeans. And my preferred method for beans is plant green. We're at worst breaking even, making a couple bushels probably over the long term on big acres. It's working very well for us. Next slide. And a lot of people who have a lot of success with the covers, every single presenter before said, yeah, after wheat, we have this awesome cover crop mix. Well, wheat in Eastern Ontario, if we can get it to survive winter, we can grow an equivalent crop to probably Woody, and like 100 to 120 bushel wheat is not out of the question. But 4 years out of 5, you might have 50 to 100% winter kill. So counting on it to get a nice cover crop is a real problem. And with anytime we do get wheat to establish, we're also really excited, and we'll typically tile the field, and then you have to do conventional tillage, so covers are out of the question there, or at least they'll be very late. So the times we do get cereals to establish, we have grown crops. This was actually a cereal rye seed production field. We grow our own seed for covers, and so this was a combination of oats and cereal rye. And fall terminated, it was fine. Next slide. There's no such things as mistakes in ag, just test plots. Mixed up the chemical and was short about 1.5 acres. So check strip. And that check strip, while it looked real cool and made some awesome photos for PowerPoints, and look at that nice clean strip. Beautiful, planted great. Except that rye, this is 2017, grew quite tall before we could get in it, about the 21st of May, I believe. And it was a 47 bushel yield drag on the corn. I don't like that, but it's pretty. Next slide. So cereal rye and corn, I've pretty much walked away. And, it's frustrating because at this stage, pre-side dress, there was no difference. If anything, the corn and the rye was actually slightly ahead. But anyone who's grown corn in cereal rye or into something that's going to high carbon environment, this is about the time where the nitrogen penalty kicks in, and it kicked in hard. Next slide. Last year, winter hit us in Eastern Ontario before we started corn harvest. So we combined 100% of our corn with at least 6 inches of snow on the ground, and we combined the last of our beans with about 2 inches of snow on the ground. So it wasn't ideal. Definitely didn't get our strips made, and as a result, got no corn on corn strip till made, and half of our bean stubble was left untouched until spring. then. So without having ever done corn on corn strip till with a single spring pass before, I changed my rotation around a bit, and we ended up actually with all of our corn on corn acres had interseeded cereal rye, mainly because these cornfields had a poor corn crop the year before. There was a lot less residue. I was more comfortable with it. Looking back at this photo, I want to smack myself and just say, plant beans, you idiot. It's going to go real bad, because corn on corn in this drought year did not do well for us. But it had nothing to do with the cereal rye. So if you can get a cool spring, cereal rye and corn can work, but it can't get any bigger than this. Next slide. So I've been all doom and gloom, and you're all probably all like, whoa, cover crops are bad, but they're not. So we have had a lot of really good success with edible beans strip tilling instead of, the typical around here for whites, blacks. There's a little bit of Adzuki's grown, is probably plow or disc grip, and then 1, 2, maybe 3 tillage passes in the spring. Get everything worked down nice and fine and perfect and pack the stones in. I've taken that a very different route. I want the residue. I want a thick crop of rye to smother weeds. I know there's been University of Guelph and I think OMAFRA has demonstrated the allelopathic effect that affects corn also affects fleabane. So some of these challenging weeds here, all right, Ann, I'll go faster. Challenging weeds are held up by the rye, the strip till. It works very well, and we've had grown some pretty impressive. These are black beans. Next slide. It's interesting. We get into that real tall rye. In the spring, we run the Soil Warrior only 2 inches deep. So you get in those high residue environments. It can be a real challenge to make a clean strip. But for me, strip till's more about the fertility than the tillage. And it just works well. So this is planting edible beans, which most edible bean growers would probably pucker and turn away. Next slide. And so we haven't given up on covers. This is, you've maybe heard of the on-farm project going on across the province. We have one of the sites on our farm, and we were allowed to choose what we got to study over the 3 years. So I said, well, let's try and get covers to work at a head of corn. So the plan here, I interseeded rye and oats into soybeans at about R5.5 to R6. And we had actually worked very well. Unfortunately, we're right on the St. Lawrence River, and we're right around the bird sanctuary. So we did fenceless controlled avian grazing in this plot, and I guess that's variable rate nutrient applications. So it might create some variability. It's uncanny. The geese landed, they cleaned the oats clean off, and they're gone. And now they're systematically wiping out the cereal rye. So there should be some interesting data out of this for next year. But I haven't minded too much because I actually have 110 acres of really nice looking winter wheat across the road from here, and they have left it alone all year. So stay tuned. Next slide. Thanks very much. Hopefully I got us a little bit caught up. Nope, took me 9 minutes. Sorry about that, guys.
Thanks very much, Warren. And yeah, you moved quite quickly. You did well. We're still in good shape. We're at 7:40, and we're going to have a good chunk of time here for some discussion. So Ben, if you can stop sharing those slides there for the moment, and we'll ask all of our speakers to put their videos back on, as well as Anne, who's going to be our moderator. So Anne, I will hand it over to you now.
Okay. So just as a heads up for anybody who's got questions, if you haven't done one of these meetings before, you take your cursor and take it down to the bottom. There'll be a black bar and there'll be a chat. And in there you can type in whatever your questions are, and they'll appear here so that I can get the right people to start answering them. Just to get things started off, maybe let's start with Woody. I see you've gone back to red clover this year. Are there any concerns or crops that you might not use red clover in a strip till system?
My strip till system is corn corn, corn, sugar beets, possibly sunflowers in the future, and there's lots. I'm not concerned about eliminating or terminating the clover in the spring. So in my system, I have no concerns at all about the red clover.
Okay. Now, sorry, I'm still working through all the questions. There was a question earlier about, and I think this is directed at any of you, around a rough guess on the return on investment from going to strip till. Somebody want to take that one? Maybe Warren?
Sure. Yeah, you can spend as much or as little as you want. I just saw an ad on Facebook Marketplace for a disc that was $192,000. You want to tell me where the ROI on that disc is? But sorry, that's just me venting. Yeah, we bought ours used. It was a failed experiment by a farmer in North Dakota. I got it for about 20 cents on the dollar compared to a new machine. Winter actually, it never works out. It's never the winter. It's always a month before you need it is when you're working through the night trying to get it ready. But yeah, we fully rebuilt it and it's good to go. It's for sale if you want it. But yeah,
Okay.
it's like tillage. You can buy a 10-year-old field cultivator for $15,000, or you can buy a $210,000 60-foot field cultivator with 4-bar coin tiles and double rolling baskets. This argument of it's too expensive, people are pretty out of touch on where tillage equipment has gone price-wise.
Okay, anybody else want to weigh in on that?
Yeah, I'll weigh in on that. I figure in the springtime we can, over conventional tillage in the spring and direct planting into our strips with our planter, you could probably easily save $50 an acre on tillage in the spring.
Okay. Brad, do you have any observations on that? Oh, unmute yourself. There we go.
Okay, is that good? Okay, so if I find for ourselves, what I looked at, we can save a pass in the fall and then one pass in the spring. So I just know for ourselves, the field truck comes a whole lot less and we can just own one piece of equipment. We don't have to have a plow and a cultivator. So that's my goal.
Okay. And Woody, you got any comments?
When I first got into the strip till and wasn't sure that it was going to work or not, I did some test strips, strip till, conventional till, and I'm just going on fuel consumption. And that the tractor could measure that at the time, and I was using 1/3 the fuel per pass, or per acre, I should say, strip tilling and conventional, and that wasn't including 2 more spring passes with a cultivator. So you can extrapolate that into tractor hours, man hours, whatever. It's not costing me money to strip till them without any hard numbers. That's just anecdotal.
Okay. So we're going to go back to a cover crop question because that is the focus for tonight. There seems to be kind of 2 sets of questions coming in, and that's great. And we'll keep talking for a while. Let's see. Why is there so much worry about cereal rye and putting corn into it? I think one of you guys talked a little bit about that, but do you want to go back and touch on that again?
You want me in?
Sure.
So the reason I started using cereal rye was one of the few things that overwintered, and my goal was to have something growing all year. Having done some work with a research project on my farm, there was a lot of evidence of 10 to 12% yield hit where there was cereal rye present in the plot. Corn didn't show it physically. It looked just as good from the get-go, but there's something between the interaction, whether it's allelopathic, whether it's nitrogen tie-up, whether it's green bridge. We're taking a yield hit using rye and corn in combination in the spring.
Now, Brad, didn't you have some rye in your biostrips?
We do. I find for herself, from the different meetings I was at, my take was the rye needs to be burned off, and it should be browned 10 days after the corn is planted. So what I'm doing is I burn it off the day it gets planted, or maybe a day or two before. That way, I guess if it's green, my understanding is, I'm still learning, I still have lots to learn, but my take is that if the rye is still growing, it's kind of tying up nitrogen from the corn. So if we put our starter fertilizer down in the spring, and then the corn needs to live off of that, and then later in the season, once the CO rye breaks down, it'll release the nitrogen later on in the season. And like I say, I'm still learning. I feel like a greenhorn, but we're burning it off right away. We don't let it grow after the corn's planted.
There's lots to be learned about rye. Unfortunately, sometimes it's the hard way. There is a whole session at the Ontario Ag Conference devoted to rye that actually Jake's helping to organize. So you might want to check that out for the people who've got more questions about rye. So one more question, Woody, just to follow up on, when was your rye killed in the experiment that Cam Ogilvie was running that had the problems with the rye?
That was sprayed 10 days ahead of planting. So it was pretty well brownish at planting and dead by the time the corn emerged.
Which goes along with the standard Midwest type of approach to kill 10 days to 2 weeks in advance.
That
But I
works.
was still seeing the yield hit.
And still seeing a yield hit, yeah.
That works in the banana belt down in Dresden, where, you know, spring starts around, I don't know what, December 18th or so. Yeah, 10 days before planting, we have snow on the ground.
Okay, now I got a question that's a combination of the equipment question and the cover crop question. So here's one. Matt mentioned strips of 8-inch width. New people to strip till seem to want to go wider. What do the speakers think about strip width? That's hard to say. Strip width in cover crops versus not cover crops. So bare ground versus cover crops. Is there a difference in your strip width? Who wants to go first?
I'll take
Matt?
that. Yeah. So when we strip in the fall, our strips are 8 inches wide, and by the time spring rolls around, they've shaved an inch off each side, it seems. We're looking for a machine that can do 10 and hopefully end up with 8 by spring. Just seems to be a little bit more forgiveness in there for the planter.
Okay, anybody else want to take that one too? Woody?
Yeah, if you go back to my slide, maybe that's a pain in the ass to go back to the slide, but there's a picture of the clover in the spring there. That's about 8 inches of band sprayed, so terminated band sprayed and strip tilled, and that's what I'm looking at in the spring, and that I'm perfectly happy with that width.
Okay, anybody else? Don't worry, there's other questions. Oh, and tech support's being kind and putting the earlier questions back up front for me. I have a question for you. When is too big of a cover crop for strip tilling? What are you comfortable with? How big can it get before you start getting nervous? And I'd say Woody or Matt, because I know I've seen some pretty big cover crops come from you guys. Woody?
And were you at my place when I was doing the stuff that was over top of the cab of the tractor?
Yep.
That
With
was
the
too big.
researchers.
Yeah, that was too big. In the fall, strip tilling in the fall, I would, as long as you can get through it without plugging up and causing too many issues, and you're getting a clean strip, you can, the trash cleans, the units are moving. I wouldn't be too concerned about being it too big. Over the top of the cab I was plugging up every once in a while with that.
Yeah. Matt, what about you?
I haven't run anything overly tall, anything up like mid-thigh maybe. The only time I ran into problems with ours plugging is after we harvested red clover for seed. If you don't have a proper spread pattern behind the combine, that trash gets laying in there thick, and it just can't get through those wavy coulters, and that's the only time I've ran into trouble with ours.
Okay. Okay, sorry, I'm going to come back to you again, Matt, because there's another question here. So comment was about how wonderful the aggregation seems that you were showing in your pictures. Awesome pictures, by the way. And wondering how long it took you to see that kind of aggregation. And the second part of the question is whether you're staying on the same strips or moving them year to year.
I'd say it took about 4 years worth of no-till and not so much strip tilling. We only had probably 1 year with the strip tilling in that field there probably. But yeah, we're seeing better aggregation. I wouldn't say it's gone from a complete slab of clay to beautiful individual aggregates overnight or in the 4 years, but yeah, it's taken some time, that's for sure. And what was the other part of that question?
Whether you're moving the strips or staying on the same spot year to year.
I think this is the first year that we've actually come around and we're starting to strip till again. So we are still using the same strip till AB lines as we did that first year we did in 2017.
Okay, so does that mean that you've shifted a little bit and now you're
I just use the same lines. We didn't have corn on that field, so we're just going to stay right on the same strips.
Okay.
I don't know if the corn's going to be a problem. Maybe Warren or Woody, you can answer that. I don't know.
What do you think, Warren?
Probably going to be fine.
Okay, now next question. This goes to all of you. Because what is the best working depth to strip till with a disc versus a shank machine? And second part of the question, because people like making long questions, does soil type make a difference? And maybe mention again what your soil types are like. So let's pick on Warren because he looks sleepy.
My 6th Zoom call today. I am sleepy. So with our Warrior, we'll run as deep as we can get it to go in the fall, which is about 5 inches, 5.5 if it has new blades. And but that's the goal. Sandy or loam, clay loam soils, we can achieve that. We have some heavy clay that I'm sure Matt understands well, that, you know, we're lucky to get 3.5, 4 inches depth. So it all depends. In the spring, as shallow as and as fast as we can go, trying to cover acres ahead of the big planter. But yeah, soil type definitely plays a role in the way any brand of strip tiller will work. Heavier the soil, it's a little more hard, but the the benefit to your crop and to your ROI increases. But more challenging the conditions on my farm, strip till will vastly exceed conventional tillage. On the garden spots of your farm, they're neck and neck. But for us, we farm quite a bit of challenging soil, so it's good.
Okay, how about Brad then? You want to make some comments?
Sorry, I just blanked. What was the question?
The question was about depth, depending on your soil types and depending on your, like, yeah, it was about depth.
Yeah, okay, I got it. So
Okay.
we got Harrison clay loam. So I feel kind of spoiled. We have pretty nice consistent soil. We have the Gladiator, which is a shank machine, and we run it as shallow as we can. That's about 4.5 inches. So I guess that's what we're doing. Some rented stony land. I guess we were actually, I don't like the idea of the shank there. I wish we would have coulters. We're thinking of maybe putting coulters on just to try not pull up the stones. Maybe we might even no-till that corn that we bought some hog manure, and we're hoping to just no-till that, I guess. So that's all.
Okay, Woody, then comments about depth, and then remind us about your soil types.
So soil type is everything from sand loam to clay loam across the farm, most farms. The Orthman, I used to run it with a shank at a good solid 6 inches. I found if I ran any shallower, it didn't function well. It didn't have the soil movement to make a nice berm. We also had the spring strip option for that machine, and we would take the shank out and run 2 more wavy coulters on sand, and that was set for about 2 inches. The Orthman runs about 4 inches deep. If I do spring strips, I shallow it up to about 2.5.
Okay, and then we're just going to finish up this question with Matt, and if Matt has some comments about depth.
Yeah, so we run a Don Pluribus on heavy Haldeman clay. We're getting it a little bit better. We can get down between 4 and 5 inches, but some really hard ground, it's hard to get it past that 4-inch mark. That's the only reason we want to go for a shank machine here in the future, is just so we can get some more constant depth. Our soil type does change a little bit as we go across the field, and we are getting deeper as we go along and shallower, and so that's why we kind of like to go to a shank machine, just get some little more uniformity of depth across the farms.
Excellent. Thanks, guys. So we're just coming up to the hour, and what we did the same as last time, we're going to take a break, go back to Jake. He's got a few things to share, including the CCA CEU sign in. So if you're CCA, get your app out, get ready. And then after that, then we'll come back and do another up to a half hour, but there's a definite hard stop at 8:30. Okay, so let's go back to Jake and his slides, please.
Thanks, Ann. And I'm just going to share my screen here quickly. So like Ann mentioned, for those of you who participated 2 nights ago, you know the drill. For those of you who are just joining tonight, you got to, and if you're a CCA, you got a couple different options. You can scan the QR code that's right here, or I just put this link in the chat. You can go to that link, and you just have to enter your name and your CCA number. If you are joining by phone and you can't use either of those options, please email Ann at ann.verhollen@ontario.ca with your CCA number. If you have another OMAFRA or soil team contact, you can email that person, and they'll forward it on to Ann. So that's that. And then just a quick plug. Again, those of you who participated 2 nights ago already heard about these videos, but I wanted to make everybody aware that this is a new strip till video series that's coming out very soon. It's led by Farm and Food Care, and there's been a lot of OMAFRA involvement. And you've actually heard from one of the kind of feature farmers that's part of this series, Warren. Him and his wife Christine are featured throughout the different videos here. And so this is meant to be a series that kind of takes you from beginning to end in terms of at least an introduction to strip till. Their videos are going to be between about 4.5 minutes to 7 minutes long, so pretty digestible. And again, you can see the different farmers that are featured throughout. If you participated last a couple nights ago, you would have heard from Gary and Ken. Mike Cornelison is going to be one of the speakers this coming Tuesday for our 3rd and final event. So with that, that's all I had in terms of kind of updates and just some general things to share. I personally think there's probably a fair number of questions, Anne, that you have not yet been able to get to. I feel like the conversation's kind of just part way. So I won't delay any further. Those of you who need to leave or want to leave, please feel free as participants. But we're, like Anne said, we'll go to 8:30 and continue to ask questions. So I'll hand it back to you, Anne.
Okay, so I'm going to work back through some of the other questions. There was one around the best time to plant your cover crop, and in this case, they're talking about oats. Anybody want to take that one?
I guess-
Possible.
You need to unmute there, Matt, if you're talking.
Sorry, Ann. Yeah, we've planted oats right behind like a week or two after we've combined wheat if we haven't got a red clover crop. That seems to work for us the few times we've done it.
Okay. Anybody else got some comments about oats?
I'd be the same. Whenever you have time right after wheat comes off.
Okay, so basically the sooner the better, so you get some growth out of them.
Would it depend on what you are following, how you're going to work into it next year? If you're going to go early, you have to make sure it doesn't get too woody on you and give you issues in the spring.
Yeah. I think that will be very regional, won't it?
Well, I guess for myself, I was thinking if the guys are still conventional till, then they probably want lots of growth. But if you're gonna let it sit over winter, then maybe you want to plant a little bit later so you don't have quite the top growth to deal with in the spring. Because our experience was back with the year we did vertical tillage, we let it grow over, the oats grow over winter, and then they, like Woody was saying, they get woody, and they flop over and it seals off and the ground won't dry out in the spring. So I would recommend, if that's what you're doing, leaving it over winter, then maybe just plant them a little later, and then once they freeze off, if they're like a foot high or something, and it just kind of shrivels up and goes down, and it doesn't flop over and seal off the ground.
Okay, here's another one around the cover crop part. What kind of seeding rate are you using for cover crops for land that's planned for strip tilling versus areas that are not going to be strip tilled?
I'll go ahead there. We've done 40 pounds of rye an acre, just broadcast on with maybe some potash and then incorporated in with our Diggleman, our Pro Till. That seems to work, and we've done that even as late as like in middle of October, and it's worked good.
Okay. Anybody else got a comment? Woody?
Depends. Again, I use a lot of cereal rye, particularly following sugar beets, and that'll be again planted green into soybeans in the spring. If I have early harvest sugar beets and they come off in September, I'm seeding 30 pounds of cereal rye. If it's the end of October, 1st of November, I'm seeding 140 pounds of cereal rye, and probably a less of effect. So as it gets later into the season, my seeding rates go up.
Anybody else with a comment?
Most of my cover crops are done a lot differently than most people. So I'm going the end of August, early September through tall corn. So I don't want to plant much more than 50 pounds to the acre. When we started, we were doing higher, closer to 70 to 90. But that was when we were still doing a lot of conventional tillage corn. And now with life is returning to the soil and all those nice things they say in presentations, our worm populations are way up. And it's actually now to the point that you'll spread rye, go back a day later, and all the rye is gone. And it's the worms that have pulled it all into their middens. I have hundreds of photos on my phone of the midden cap with rye coming up all around it. It's so cool. So because of that, we've been able to claw rates back as low as on broadcast, even to 25 pounds, and still get a pretty decent cover. But for us on our clay, less is more with covers ahead of soybeans. It's no-till has its challenges enough. You're making it worse with a cover, but the benefits are definitely there for us. But we're every year a little less, it seems. Then that gravity box of seed goes more acres. So.
Okay, I'd hate to take you out of context there where you say about no-till and cover crops making it worse on no-till. Do you want to talk about that a little bit more?
Well, it's real easy to drag a seed drill through a disked field. It takes more skill to no-till, and it's not hard. Like I actually, we're to the point now on our farm where we're about a 5 to 9 bushel yield drag if I do tillage ahead of soybeans. Not too many people can say that, but with our soil, it's just the way it is. And then the rye, we figure we're gaining about 3 days planting green no-till. So that equates to about 3 bushels. That's University of Guelph, a bushel a day past May 15th. So that's what we're getting. It's costing this year. Actually, our cost of seeded was less than a bushel of soybeans. So the economics are working for me. But I also have highly specialized equipment to do the job. But no-till is good. Cover crops are good. There you go.
Okay. Let's do this next one. Something around, can you talk about the height of rye that affects yield on corn? So this is that planting back into corn. And is there any size that affects yield on soybeans? Or you could actually maybe take it as, is planting green a problem in any other crop other than maybe corn when you're working with rye? Anybody want to take that?
All right. Just the research is starting to show that there's issues, I think, with rye and corn in the spring. The bigger it is, I think the bigger the issue is going to be. As for soybeans, I've made the mistake of planting 90 pounds of cereal rye in September on a highly fertile field, and planted green into that, rolled a flat, had a 3-inch mat. That cost me about 7 bushels and 7 days of maturity. There weren't a lot of weeds. It was almost to the point where I didn't have to spray that. But I'm going to echo what Warren said earlier, that with cover crops, sometimes less is more. You can be too thick. So a little too thin is better than a little too thick.
Brad, you got a comment? I see you unmuted.
Yeah. So we're just dealing with cereal rye with corn and beans. I agree too. I think less is better. In those biostrip pictures that I showed, we just had 15 pounds of rye. And for the soybeans, all we do is, I guess, after silage, which is just a small amount of our acres, it's actually just 8 pounds. And I like thin. That way you don't have that thick mat to deal with in the spring. Some people say that it actually dries out if you have a thick mat, but I also made the mistake one year. I planted it too thick. It wasn't drying out down below. It was almost in head. We couldn't get in early. So I ended up actually taking the strip tiller through, and then I planted 30-inch beans. It actually was fantastic, and we didn't either have any weeds barely. But as a whole, I think too, less is better.
Okay. Anybody else? Otherwise, I'll move on to another question because they're stacking up now. It's kind of crazy. Okay. Have any of you looked at using roller crimpers in front of strip till units in the spring in order to kill off cereal rye? Anybody?
You'd be pretty late on your corn by the time the rye got tall enough for a roller crimper. Maybe for soybeans it might work, but at that point, just no-till the soybeans.
Fair enough. Okay. Here's another one. If you don't have the manure, is there benefit to a bit of nitrogen to kick the cover crop into gear? Any comments? Most of you have manure. Warren, you don't have any manure, do you?
Not anymore. Well, that's not true. I got about a quarter of a manure lagoon still to get out at some point.
Well, other than the duck poo that you have now, do you see any value in adding nitrogen to a cover crop to get more growth out of it?
Not for me. But again, if I was growing wheat, maybe in a cover crop cocktail or something like that after wheat, then I don't know. I'm sure if you're grazing, yeah, likely would pay in grazing days and pounds per acre feed value. But for me, no.
Anybody else got comments?
I'm thinking if you're following wheat without manure and you're going to a multi-species, things like radish or even sorghum Sudan, things like that, they're going to need something. So if you're planning on putting MAP down or something, even that 10 or 12 pounds goes a long ways to getting it a little bit of a boost. If I don't use manure, I'm using red clover. So it's self-fertilizing for that matter.
Okay. Brad, you're unmuted. I'm guessing you have something to weigh in on.
Oh, I didn't mute myself again. Sorry.
Oh, okay. Well, I think this next one might be coming to you anyways. So there's a question around tillage radish in a 30-inch row, because I think you had some bio strips. Does it do enough to just run a freshener in the spring instead of 2 passes and it's non-tiled ground? So I think you're the only one with bio strips, right?
I think so.
Yeah, so you've got 2 rows of radish and 2 rows of rye, I believe.
Correct. So they're wondering if, sorry.
They're saying tillage radish in a 30-inch row, does it do enough to just run a freshener in the spring instead of 2 passes? And this is on non-tiled ground, so I'm guessing.
So they're wondering if the radish did enough. What's the word? The taproot to help. Yeah. I am quite happy with how it looks. Like there's lots of these holes from the radish rots over winter, and then you have these nice holes there where the water goes in. And yeah, I barely know how to answer that. I'm kind of at a loss.
But
I think it would help. It would help. It certainly would. I guess that question kind of takes me off guard.
Okay, but you're not just relying on the radish to be your strip tillage in that area, are you?
Oh, that way. Is that what the question is? So
no,
if we would have
equipment, but
if we would have dry fertilizer on our planter, I think it would be fun to no-till into those strips in the spring. It kind of goes against the grain to actually strip till into those nice mellow zones in the spring. However, our past experiences, we had double disc openers on our 6-row of the old planter, and we found it made a little bit of a depression after it was planted. So then we went to single disc with that planter the next winter, and that fixed the problems. But our new planter now doesn't have the option of dry fertilizer, so we're kind of forced to strip till to get a fertilizer in. But I do kind of think that you would probably get away with it if you would have dry fertilizer on your planter, that you could probably just no-till into that.
there is a whole research project on biostrips where they're planting directly into them that Laura Vineyard and Josh Nitzelski are working on. So that'll be interesting to see what they're getting in the small plots. Okay, let's see. Another question. After wheat, is anyone having success just broadcasting a cover crop? The drill is an expensive pass, but I want my cover crop up fast for weed suppression. So, Matt, Woody?
Yeah. Broadcasting it after wheat, unless you're going to work it in and incorporate it with a minimum tillage. And I don't know, I've tried it before, and it's hard to catch a rain at that time of the year. It seems like around here sometimes to get that germinated. But yeah, if you're going to broadcast it after wheat, yeah, it's going to need some incorporating out, or that seed will just lay on the ground for 3 weeks until it gets a rain.
I don't know, you just rig something up that drops the seed on the chaff spreader or your combine, because anything that comes out the back of the combine seems to grow just fine.
True.
But for us, like with, like Matt just said, to catch, you're probably gonna want an inch, maybe 2 inches of rain on that dry wheat stubble to get good seed to soil contact. Yeah, the drill is expensive, I agree, but maybe a vertical till pass or something, even a disc. I don't know. Like I know, Matt, you were talking about a pro till, probably running it 1, maybe 2 inches deep, just to bury it a little.
Yeah, we've just enough to throw some dirt on top of the seed and close those cracks in the ground.
Any other comments from people?
I would say the drill would cut your seeding cost of seed in half or more for established stand over broadcast. So take the cost of drilling and do the math on your seed savings cost. So
Anybody else? Okay, here's another one. I know you guys are always changing and updating, and you've got the next new thing you're trying. What is your next new thing? What's your next new refinement around strip till and cover crops? And maybe start with Warren.
I'm gonna wait until it rains in June so I can finally grow a good corn crop again, and then have some money to play with. It's been 3 droughts in a row. It's yeah. I don't like this soybeans carrying the farm thing, or wheat. We've been focusing a lot on soil compaction mitigation and controlling traffic. That's where for us on our clay, we have very shallow soils with a really, really heavy clay, stony subsoil. So subsoil compaction for us is way more limiting. So we have kind of just been carrying on with the strip till covers rotation, doing our best to get wheat in, and really focusing on soil compaction mitigation. That's where we've been putting our dollars.
Matt.
I would say for us, we've been pretty big proponents of tiling on our farms. I think we're going to keep at that. And we've last year and this year, we've got some scratches on some paper about some irrigation, I think might be the next step.
Brad.
Probably going forward, time is always a problem. I would like to play with interseeding rye into corn as well, like Warren's talking of. Like I say, time is a limiting factor. That these things do take time. If you're busy with that time of year, you're busy spraying, and then all of a sudden wheat harvest is there, and so yeah, that's what I'd like to get into if we could. Just the idea of also, I like the idea of driving the combine over a green mat to try and carry the weight, have a softer soil, and also in the future, hopefully, if it all goes like it's supposed, or like we're hoping, soil health improvement, we're hoping to decrease our fertilizer. Hopefully, the soil can help us out in that end of things as well. That's everything.
Okay, Woody. You're muted.
sorry, just on the sane side of things, I think my goal going forward is to try to stretch out my crop rotation from try to introduce some more crops. The tough part with that is ensuring there's a market for these things. Just wondering about the benefits of diversity over time as much as diversity in any particular cover crop mix.
Okay, here's another one. Is anybody using liquid starter when they do plant green with soybeans? Nope from Woody.
No.
Nope from Brad. Nope from Warren.
We
Yep.
played with it. Couldn't make it pay.
Okay, Matt.
Yeah, we've been using liquid fertilizer with our beans. Does it pay? I don't think so. We're still playing with that one there a little bit.
Okay, so now I've got the soul searching question. Because we all learn not from the things that worked out really well, we learn from the things that might make you cringe a little. So what were your biggest challenges or fail, if you wanted to use the big F word, failures that you've learned a lot from? Somebody want to start? Things that were, it's kind of like an aha moment, but it's a, oh crap, I don't want to do that again. I have to fix it.
I'll start that off. Our big F was we strip tilled in the fall into red clover, and it was kind of muddy, and we probably shouldn't have been out there. We didn't know any better. Anyway, we tried it, and we were told to just leave the red clover growing over the winter and into the spring. Anyway, spring rolled around, and that red clover kept growing, and it looked beautiful. Strips looked good, but as they dried out, the strips that we had made in the fall were just like saw cuts in concrete. There was a crack that ran up from one end of the field right to the other. The roots of the red clover held all the soil together in between the rows, and then there's nothing in that strip, and it was just a crack about 1 foot deep by 1 inch wide, and that was our big F. Couldn't even, we tried planting to do it, and it kind of worked, it kind of didn't, but so I'm sure some seeds are 2 feet to 1 foot down.
Was that one of the drier years too?
Yes, I think it was.
Okay, anybody else? The oopses that you learned from.
2016, well, in the fall of 2015, we had a real warm fall, and our covers grew very aggressive. Cereal rye had like 6-7 tillers, and it was when we were learning, we were still planting too thick. Then spring came, and I got cocky, wanted the real nice plant green photo for a PowerPoint presentation, and let a few farms just go and go and go and go, and it never rained. And it took 69 days for those beans to come out of the ground. And the yield impact there was one I won't forget ever. May 1st, if there's no rain in the forecast, kill everything and kill it with fire.
Okay, Brad?
Like I spoke earlier, with that old crop getting too tall and then breaking over, and then it sealed off in the spring. That was no good. It just didn't dry out underneath, and we had to wait longer to plant. And the other one, I guess I also mentioned, the cereal rye going green over winter. If it gets too high in the spring, I guess for ourselves, we were having trouble to get it to dry out. So that's all. Well, there was more, get me, right? I just can't think of them right now.
Woody?
Trying to decide which one. I talked about seeding too thick already with cereal rye early. Talked about cover crop over top of the cab of the combine tractor trying to strip till. You missed the plugging an 8-row strip till from one end to the other. That was after you guys left. That species selection at that point was starting to really ring in my head. Another one, it was probably a year or two after the fixed cereal mat, taking a week off the maturity and 7 bushels off the yield. I thought, well, I've got the same issue here. Why roll it? I'm just going to drive the planter through it and leave 50% standing, let the beans grow up. Beans did fine. I had a beautiful crop of fleabane because I couldn't get the herbicide to the ground where there was open ground because of the shading effect of the standing rye. And the combine hated it because that old standing stubble from that rye wouldn't dry up. And I won't mention the hand singles that I got from the combine operator that year.
Okay, so those were the learning challenges, right? If you don't try, you don't learn. I kind of want to end this on a really positive note about strip till and cover crops as a combination. So just quickly, could you sum up why you've incorporated cover crops with your strip till and what it really brings to you, like why you put the extra management, the extra money into it? And we'll go around and get all of you to sum up for the last couple of minutes, because we got about 3 minutes and then we have our hard stop. So Brad, do you want to start?
I guess we just seen the difference in the mellow soil. If you had a cover crop versus beside if you didn't, it seemed hard and dead. And if you have this living cover crop, the root system, there's something about it. It's the softest, mellowest soil to plant into in the spring. And I'm guessing that's what keeps me going with the cover crops.
Okay, Warren.
Longer I do this, the more conferences I go to, the more you realize it's all about the carbon, it's all about the root exudates, it's all about the diversity. All of those things can offer you some challenges, but the benefits vastly outweigh it. So yeah, that's why I'm trying to make covers in front of corn work. I keep failing, which I guess means I'm trying hard enough. But you know, that corn is an awesome leaky plant. It does great things for the soil. Corn on corn is harder to do. So we need rotation. We need that diversity. But it's all about the roots. Roots means worms and everything else. It's wonderful. Microbiology. Yeah.
Okay, Woody.
So one of my goals is to always have a living root system growing at 365 days a year. The cover crop strip till combination allows me to do that with a lot of flexibility in the spring of how I'm going to deal with that cover crops. There's that bare strip that's always there to plant into. So I see it as an excellent compromise to having a root system growing and a system that allows a lot of flexibility in the spring to still plant.
Matt.
I'm still pretty new at all this cover cropping stuff. We're still trying to find a place and how it fits on our farm. But like this last year, we broadcast rye on and worked it in, and went to no-till into it this year. And I had anxiety, and I was told by every neighbor down the street that it wouldn't work and it would be a mess. And I believed them, but we no-tilled into it, and it was the best crop of soybeans we've ever had. It was amazing, and it worked great. And I'm definitely, we did it again this fall here, spread more rye for beans. And it's yeah, there's something about it. We just got to kind of figure out how it's fitting and how it's benefiting us.
Great. Thank you so much, guys, for joining and sharing both your successes and your failures today. That's really important. And I think everybody who's been on, and at least at one point I saw 149 participants. So that's really cool. And thank you so much for sharing. At this point, I'll turn it back to Jake to close the evening.
Okay, thanks very much, Anne, for leading that session. And again, thanks to Woody, Warren, Matt, and Brad. It's really generous of you guys to have taken a big chunk of your evening to share your experiences. Also like to thank Ben Rosser for doing some work on the back end, advancing our slides. Sebastian Belliard for figuring out that issue at the start and getting us on track with Zoom, and Andrew Barry and Christine Brown as well. And finally, thanks to all of you for showing up. Really been happy with the turnout and how many stayed on for the last half hour here, which I personally enjoyed quite a bit. So with that, we'd love to have you back next Tuesday, December 15th, for our third and final session on strip tillage. And I think that's it. So thanks again, everybody, and have a great night.